In the quiet town of Everbrook, nestled between green hills and whispering woods, lived a boy named Elian Wren. Elian wasn't the tallest, nor the strongest, nor even the most handsome by conventional standards, but there was something about him that drew people in, especially girls. Not in a way that was arrogant or flashy, but something more sincere, like a melody people couldn't help but hum even if they didn't know where it came from. He had a warm smile that made you feel seen, truly seen, and eyes that held the kind of kindness that wasn't taught but born into. His voice was soft yet firm, like a calm wind that carried truth rather than noise. People, especially girls, gravitated toward him not because he sought attention, but because he gave it without expecting anything in return. From an early age, Elian had been the kind of boy who helped people carry groceries, picked up stray animals to return them home, and remembered birthdays with small handmade gifts. But it wasn't just kindness. There was something else, a mystery that seemed to live quietly behind his thoughtful glances. The girls in town would often talk about it in hushed giggles. "Did you see how he held the library door open for Mrs. Colby today? He listens. I mean, really listens. Like your words matter. I swear when he looked at me, it was like he understood everything I was too afraid to say." It wasn't uncommon for girls to leave notes in his locker at school, or sit a little closer than necessary during lunch, hoping he'd notice. He did notice, of course, but never in a way that made anyone feel awkward. Elian had a way of accepting affection without feeding it, of acknowledging feelings without exploiting them. He wasn't playing a game, he just treated people like they were important. One spring, a new girl moved to Everbrook, Saria. She was clever, with eyes like storm clouds and a sharpness that kept most people at a distance. But not Elian. He greeted her the same way he did everyone else, with sincerity. She tried to keep her walls up, but Elian's quiet presence was disarming. He never asked too many questions, never pried, just sat with her under the oak tree at lunch when no one else dared to. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one afternoon. "Doing what?" he replied, glancing up from his sketchbook. "Being kind. To me. Because you deserve kindness," he said simply, without looking up again. That was the beginning of something gentle. Saria didn't fall in love the way others did, with blushing cheeks and racing hearts, but slowly, like snow melting into the soil. And she wasn't alone. At any given time, it seemed like a dozen girls in Everbrook were carrying silent crushes for Elian Wren. Some knew about each other. Some didn't. But there was no rivalry, no bitterness, because Elian never promised more than friendship, and still, that friendship was golden. There was Emma, who danced ballet and felt most at peace when Elian came to her recitals and left flowers afterward. There was Jules, the aspiring writer, who secretly based the hero of her fantasy novel on Elian's calm courage. And there was Maya, the star soccer player, who swore she played better when she knew Elian was watching from the bleachers. Elian, for his part, never dated anyone. Not out of arrogance or indecision, but because he was waiting. Not for someone perfect, but someone right. He believed love wasn't a storm that swept you away, but a garden you tended day by day, rain or shine. Then, during their final year of school, something shifted. Saria, who had grown more open and soft around him, wrote him a letter. It was honest, a little messy, and full of trembling courage. She didn't expect him to return the feelings, only to know them. He met her under the oak tree where they'd spent so many lunches. "I read it," he said, holding the folded letter in his hand. "And?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm glad you told me," he said. Then he paused. "Because I feel the same." And like that, the story of the boy every girl loved became the story of a boy who chose love, not the loud, sweeping kind, but something deeper. The town sighed and smiled. There were no broken hearts, only the bittersweet ache of growing up and the warm knowledge that the boy they loved had found what he'd been quietly waiting for. And though Elian and Saria eventually moved away, off to college, and then to a little city by the coast, the girls who had once watched him walk the school hallways remembered him with fondness. They didn't remember him as the one who got away, but the boy who made them believe that kindness was worth loving, and love was worth waiting for. Because sometimes, the people we love most aren't the ones who make the biggest noise, but the ones who listen, truly listen, until we're brave enough to speak. Years passed after Elian and Saria left Everbrook. The sleepy town, with its gentle hills and cobbled streets, moved on, as towns do. The old oak tree by the school stood tall, and every spring it bloomed with stories the wind still whispered. Elian's name would sometimes come up in quiet conversations, like a melody from another season. "Remember Elian Wren?" "Of course. How could anyone forget?" But life, as it often does, turned pages. Elian and Saria settled in a small apartment near the coast. He studied art and literature, while she pursued marine biology, always curious about the world beneath the waves. They were different in many ways, yet complementary. Saria was driven, passionate, sometimes restless. Elian remained the same quiet presence, steady, listening, anchoring. Yet with time, even the gentlest love faces storms. Their schedules became hectic. Late-night study sessions turned into all-nighters in separate rooms. The silences between them grew, not cold, but hollow, like spaces left unfilled. They didn't fight. That was never their way. But something delicate was shifting. One rainy evening, Saria came home to find Elian sitting by the window, sketching the way the droplets chased each other down the glass. "Elian," she said, her voice careful. "Are we okay?" He didn't look up immediately. "I think we're changing." "That scares me," she admitted. "It should," he replied softly. "But not all change is bad." They talked for hours that night. Not arguing, but opening, peeling back fears, doubts, and everything unspoken. By the time morning lit their kitchen tiles, they knew the truth. They loved each other, but love needed room to grow, and sometimes space to breathe. So they made the hardest decision. They took a break. Not as a goodbye, but as a promise, to find themselves again, separately, so that if and when they returned to each other, it would be whole, not half. Elian moved back to Everbrook for a while. The town welcomed him like an old friend. The girls who had once loved him were now young women, some married, some mothers, some dreamers chasing stars in distant cities. They met Elian with warm smiles and easy laughter. No bitterness. Just the familiarity of someone who had once been a chapter in their own story. One day, while walking past the bookstore, he saw Emma, still dancing, now teaching ballet to kids. She waved him in. "Elian Wren back from the sea," she teased. He chuckled. "Just passing through. Trying to figure things out." "You always did think too much," she said kindly, handing him a coffee. "Want to know something funny?" "What?" "I never really wanted to date you," Emma confessed. "I just wanted someone to believe in me the way you did." He smiled. "You always had it in you." Over the next few weeks, he reconnected, with Jules, who had published her novel and thanked him in the acknowledgments, with Maya, who coached the girls' soccer team at the high school, and even with Mrs. Colby, the librarian, who still remembered the boy who always helped carry her bags. But it wasn't nostalgia that held him there. It was a quiet reflection. In loving so many, and being loved by many more, Elian had given pieces of himself, willingly, beautifully. But now, he was learning how to gather those pieces back, not to take them away, but to understand them better. To know who he was without being needed. To be whole alone. Then, one evening, a letter arrived. The envelope was sea blue. The handwriting familiar. "Elian. I found a reef today that looked like fire under the water. It reminded me of you. Not because you burn, but because you glow. I think I'm ready if you are. Saria." Elian folded the letter slowly. He looked out at the golden hills of Everbrook, then toward the road that led beyond them. The oak tree swayed gently in the wind. The air smelled like beginnings. He packed his sketchbook, locked the door behind him, and drove toward the coast. Years later, when people spoke of Elian Wren, they didn't talk about how many girls had loved him. They spoke of how he made people feel safe, heard, seen. He and Saria built a life not perfect, but deep. Their love wasn't loud, but strong, the kind that could bend with the wind and not break. The kind that learned to return, not just stay. And sometimes, when the sun set low and the tide whispered secrets against the rocks, they'd sit together in silence, knowing that in a world full of noise, the quiet kind of love lasts the longest.